Protein, it's everywhere right now, in your feed, on your grocery store shelves, in every fitness app. And somehow we're all still getting it wrong. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Michael Edney, a physician, a registered dietitian, and a professional chef. He's going to walk us through exactly what protein does, how much you actually need, and the myths that are costing you results. We're going to cover the 7 most common questions our patients have about protein. Okay, let's dive in. Dr. Edney, before we get started, I have to tell people who you are because your background is unlike anyone else I know in medicine. You started your career as a professional chef, 7 years in the kitchen. Then you went back to school, became a registered dietitian. And then, because apparently that wasn't enough, you went to medical school at Trinity College Dublin, graduated with honors, and became a board-certified family medicine physician licensed in all 50 states. So when it comes to food and health, you've literally done it from every angle: the kitchen, the clinic, and the research. There's no one who's better able to speak on this topic, in my opinion.
Well, thank you for having me.
Before we get into the myths, I want to make sure that our audience has a solid baseline. Can you just walk us through, at the most fundamental level, what protein actually is and why the body needs it?
So protein is a macronutrient, right? And I don't like necessarily to think of protein in isolation. It's part of a bigger nutritional pattern, right? In addition to our macronutrients, we have our micronutrients. Those are going to be our vitamins and our minerals. So macronutrients, all three are extremely helpful and necessary, right? Not just protein, which we're going to talk about today. And of course, our micronutrients and our fiber is super important. So each one plays a role. Protein is important, obviously, for skeletal muscle, also important for smooth muscle. And smooth muscle is part of our heart, part of our gastrointestinal systems, our skin, collagen, hair. It plays a role in all those cell turnover, right? It's not the end all be all. We need to also be aware of everything else around it.
There is such a focus on protein in the news and everywhere. So I appreciate you clearing that up. There's a bunch of myths that float around. I get this, you get this from patients all the time. So I figured we could just kind of dispel some of them now. Myth number 1 is the RDA for protein actually enough. We'll start with the government's recommendation. It's 0.8 grams per kilogram. Most people assume that that number is optimal. What's your opinion?
Right. Those numbers are really to prevent deficiency, right? So they're saying you need that for general health and not to be deficient. So I would think of that as the number you need to prevent deficiency, not the number that you need for optimal health.
What do you think is optimal?
It's taken decades of sort of research, but I think the research is becoming more clear that with the newest food pyramid, I think it's correct to say 1.2 to 1.6 is probably in your optimal range.
That makes sense. So generally speaking, the RDA is really just about covering your minimum basis. But if you really want to be healthy and optimal, it's 1.2 to 1.6.
Yeah. And remember, the RDAs came out a very long time ago when food was more expensive, more scarce, World War II, the Great Depression. So they weren't looking optimal or even the best for health. They were looking at how can we keep our population from not being deficient, right? So there was a different goal in mind, so to speak. And now, as where we are in 2026, where we have, of course, better research, and we're more interested in, again, health span, longevity, and kind of being our optimal or best selves, I suppose. So,
this isn't a myth, but I get this a lot from patients. What does it actually look like to be protein deficient? I mean, we don't see that in the U.S. What does it look like? Or have you even seen it in the hospitals when you're working as a registered dietitian?
And when you sort of think about protein malnutrition or sometimes protein calorie malnutrition, you're going to kind of think of Africa, right? Where they have the big bellies, and that's because they're not eating protein so much. So their albumin, which is an attack protein derived by the liver, they're not eating enough protein for their liver to produce albumin. As that goes low, the onconic pressure sort of allows fluid to seep out, and you fill up with fluid in the interstitial space. So in America, if you're going to see it, you're probably most likely to see it in anorexic patients. But again, that's sort of a combination of protein calorie malnutrition, not necessarily strictly protein malnutrition. And right. I suppose there's probably some people on some extreme diets. You don't really see it now because we're all talking about protein. But, if you went on an extreme diet or a vegan and you weren't careful, potentially it could happen.
Now, you and I talked about this previously, but you've seen the other end of the spectrum where people are getting way too much protein. I think people would want to know what that looks like. Is like, what's the problem? If I'm not likely to not have enough, that's not going to be an issue. What about getting too much? Is that more likely the risk?
Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of Americans probably are getting a good amount of protein. Our sizes of our plates and the sizes of our steaks and our portion sizes are so large. We probably, for the majority of people, are probably in that 1.2 range pretty easily. There's not a lot of harm of getting over 1.6 per kilogram. The really harm would come if you have kidney disease, because you would turn over urea or nitrogen, and your body, if it had kidney disease, would not be able to get rid of that. So if you have some chronic kidney disease, you'd need to be careful about that. Otherwise, your body should be able to get rid of excess protein. You'll be okay as long as your kidneys are functioning well and you're drinking enough fluid. But I do have concerns when patients are eating too much protein, because it leaves out some other things that we just talked about. It leaves out the micronutrients, right? It leaves out the fiber, So if you're loading your plate with just protein, that's not a really well-balanced diet, because like we said, in the overall context of things, the body needs fiber, it needs vitamins and minerals, fruits, vegetables, and other things. And so I don't necessarily think it's harmful, but again, it's not well-balanced for your body's other needs, I'd say.
Okay. You brought up a point about people with kidney disease, and that actually brings up the second myth I see a lot. Will eating more protein damage my kidneys? So if somebody's perfectly healthy, is it a problem for their kidneys to just have too much protein?
It would be very rare. Hypothetically possible, very rare. Average person probably doesn't need to worry about that. Other than, I would say stay well hydrated so your kidneys don't get dehydrated. Dehydration can cause acute kidney injury. Like most things in the body can get rid of excess pretty easily through the kidneys. Obviously, you can overwhelm it, and if you have kidney trouble, it would make things worse.
Okay, that's great. That brings up the next question, right? So if people who are healthy and they're staying hydrated are generally safe from having issues with their kidneys, is there too much protein in the sitting? So a lot of times the myth I always hear is, can your body only absorb 30 grams per meal? Every guy at the gym has heard this. You can only use 30 grams per gym, and then anything else is wasted. Give us a little background on that.
Let's go back to absorption first, probably, right? So usually when you absorb any macronutrient, micronutrient, there's only so much transport systems within your lining of the intestines, and those can get overwhelmed. So first of all, when you digest it, it's going to go down to amino acids, dipeptides, tripeptides, which are 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 links of amino acids. And that gets into the bloodstream. Ideally, your body is going to use that for cellular repair of skeletal muscle, of hair turnover, skin turnover. But you can max that system out in one very clear setting, right? And it's not like adipose tissue where you're storing the fat, or it's not like glycogen, which is storage of carbohydrates in your liver. Your body's going to look for a way to use that protein. But if your skeletal muscle is all repaired, it really doesn't need it. Well, then, and you're eating too many calories, that extra protein can be converted into fat, right? Excess calories. Now, your body doesn't want to do that, but if you're eating such a high amount of protein, probably not necessary. But I think there's a curve to it, right? It'll max out probably 30, 35, 40, depending on your body size and skeletal muscle size. But there probably is a point of diminishing return, so to speak. More isn't always better. I tell my patients, spread it out through the day. That maximizes absorption, maximizes the amino acids there for cellular turnover and skeletal growth when needed. I kind of think of a roller coaster, right? Like level the roller coaster a bit instead of these highs and lows, right?
Very good. So if I heard you correctly, like you can absorb more than 30 or 40 grams, but it's less and less the more you're eating, right? So maybe if you eat 100 grams, you only get 60 of them actually get absorbed.
Yeah, I think it's unnecessary to probably go higher than 40 in a single setting, unless there are circumstances, lifestyle circumstances, like you're at work and you just can't get it. And so if that's the only way to get your protein, yeah, I would have 60 grams, right? I would say it's maybe not ideal, but go ahead and do it.
I think our biggest one probably is the intermittent fasters. And I'm sure we'll talk about this on another video chat. But intermittent fasters, a lot of people I know are on a cycle where they're only eating during a 6-hour window, 8-hour window at most. Right. And so would you do the same bookend, 60 and 60, or would you kind of spread it out in those 6 or 8 hours?
I would try to spread it out. So I would say every 2 to 3 hours, right, you're going to eat at least 30 to 40 grams of protein in that short period.
Perfect. That's really helpful. That 1.6 per kilogram, I don't want to leave this point, but you and I talked about this before. Is that your actual body weight or your ideal body weight? Because I know there's a difference.
Yeah, it depends on your patient's goals or client's goals, but yeah, it's usually ideal body weight. Unless someone wants to gain weight, particularly gain muscle mass, I would probably use that goal weight. So for example, a skinny teenager that's really wants to bulk up, I would use to what they want to bulk up to. Whereas an older adult who wants to stay a little on the leaner side, not an athlete, and they're overweight, I would then use their ideal body weight. You could use an extreme example of someone morbidly obese where they're maybe 400 or 500 pounds. Typically, dietitians will use an adjusted body weight where they're assuming that extra body weight is actually 25% muscle.
Yeah. Okay, that's super helpful. So I think we move on to the next myth, which myth number 4, do you need protein within 30 minutes of working out? The post-workout shake panic. I see people rushing out of the gym to chug protein. Everybody's always walking around with their protein shakes.
Yeah.
Is that 30-minute window real, or is it just total bullshit?
So that used to be current knowledge. I think in the 90s, that was sort of the common sort of perception that you needed it because your body needed those amino acids to help the skeletal muscle right away. And those amino acids are pro-growth. I think most recently, that's not the sort of what we think. Studies that came out saying that as long as that a whole entire day and that protein needs are met, you'll be okay. The timing doesn't matter as much. I think adding your glycogen or carbohydrate after you work out is just as important because that will be used to replenish the glycogen that you use depending on the type of workout, instead of your body breaking down skeletal muscle to make glycogen because you were so depleted. I'd be thinking more of every 3 hours, get that roller coaster to not have peaks and valleys, so to speak.
You know, I really, gosh, if I'm hearing this message, the one thing I'd want to know is what is the best source of protein right after a workout, right? Like there's a million different shakes out there, and I know there's been lead contamination in a lot of those, powder shakes. But do you have a preferred protein drink, or do you recommend a particular style? Like I've seen the smoothie protein shakes, that would kind of cover everything. But what do you think is the best source?
So I'll tell you, I don't have a preference. It has to fit in against your lifestyle, right? And that can mean a lot of different things. It's going to mean convenience. Do you have the ability to actually prepare something? Do you have time to shop and cook and that? Or do you need something quick because you have work to do and you're squeezing in a workout where a shake is more suitable? So I think lifestyle, how you incorporate it, and how you can be consistent about it, right? So I make sure consistency is huge on this. So use a shake if it's convenient and there's no other way around it. Use wholesome food if you can, if you have the time and energy to do that. In terms of shake, most people use whey protein. Whey protein provides the best absorption and will increase your amino acid content the most rapidly, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, you can use pea protein and it'll be just fine. I focus more on the total grams of protein. But again, I wouldn't obsess over it. It's a small sort of difference.
Awesome. That actually brings up the next question I have, but it's not one of the myths, so I want to jump into it now. Do you have a strong preference? Do you have a strong preference on, animal proteins versus vegetable proteins? Like I sent you a packet I had gotten and I was putting in my coffee, the mushroom protein. You never responded, by the way, so this is a good opportunity for you to tell me if that was bullshit or not.
Yeah, again, I think it's more about lifestyle and convenience and kind of your values, so to speak.
Yeah.
You don't need to, so I would pick and choose based on that and not necessarily what's optimal, so to speak, because
Sure.
both are suitable, right? You can do just well on a vegan diet and get plenty of protein. I think it has more to do with other factors that allow you to choose your food. And those factors would be cost, convenience, how much time you have, or other ethical concerns, right? The environment, animal rights, things like that. So I don't want to judge someone if they just want to restrict their protein to one source. I work with them and sort of just optimize, again, that source that they want to use. And I don't think you have to weigh one against the other. I kind of work with my clients in terms of, listen, what are your values and do you put yourself in any restrictions? Some don't.
Sure.
And what do you like to eat, right? I'm not going to force someone or tell you to meet your protein goals by eating something that you don't want. That's not sustainable.
I like elk and ostrich for those out there, which you won't eat with me, Mike. All right. Well, I want to make sure we cover this though. Is there benefits of one protein versus the other, irrespective of like the value system? Are there benefits to some? Because I'm just not giving up red meat. That's not on the table, right? But I do try and stick more towards vegetables.
Yeah. So again, whey protein typically is what they would use in studies, and those are highly absorbable and efficient. And also eggs, right? So eggs are a complete protein, very efficient. So if you really wanted to maximize every gram of protein to be absorbed as much as possible and to be utilized as much as possible, you'd probably lean towards whey protein, some eggs, and probably meat. And again, if you're on more of a vegan diet, having your protein source being soybeans, tofu, nuts and legumes, you might want to shoot a little bit more than 1.6 per kilogram, right? I think it's more important to sort of hit your goals and get your timing right, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Very helpful. All right, the next myth I want to talk about is myth number 5. Do older adults need less protein? This one could actually be dangerous if people get it wrong. As we age, we become less active. Do our protein needs go down? So my 88-year-old father and I think weigh within 20 pounds of each other. Should we be eating the same amount of protein, or is there a big difference?
But also their activity level. So I do think the elder population probably should be eating more protein, and they're probably in this country the most at risk for not getting enough. Because as we get older, we tend not to drink as much as we should, and they're not as active, and as they become less active, they become maybe not eating as appropriate as they should. So I do think they need to be very sort of cognizant of their protein needs. I would say 1.2 per kilogram is definitely sort of the floor that they should be hitting. I usually increase that if I think I want them to lose weight, or I increase that up to 1.6 if I know that they're going to be active, right? Again, especially for the older population, so important to combine resistance training with your protein intake to maximize that protein in your body. It's the resistance training that's going to cause that stress on the skeletal muscle and that injury to the cell in the muscle, and it's going to be the protein that complements it to build it back up to be stronger. So,
like the big risk for our seniors is if they break a hip or break a bone. If they're putting muscle on and maintaining that muscle, how protective a factor is that? Like, we know that muscle helps promote longevity, but particularly if we've got the risk of falls and things like that, how does that play in when you're a senior citizen?
Yeah, so it's huge. It is huge because as we all age, we're at risk of losing our balance, risk of falling, right? And preserving that muscle mass is going to prevent that, right? So I think it's hugely important to get that message across that strength training, balance training, to be functionally able to get out of your chair and go up and down stairs and maintain that with resistance training and good muscle intake will help you get over any injuries that you occur later in life or any hospitalizations that you have later in life. If you have a good functional muscle, you have a reservoir of amino acids there that you can handle the stress when that illness or that injury comes.
Is it ever too late to start? I saw a cover story about a young lady in her 80s who became a bodybuilding champion in that decade. She'd never lifted weights before, nothing. And then at 88, she was competing. It was she had a pretty phenomenal physique at 88. But is it ever too late to start for patients who maybe never lifted in their entire life?
Never too late to start. Always beneficial, usually with supervision, usually with clearance from your doctors. If you're supervised and you're using good form and you're slow and steady and building some consistency, it is enormously beneficial as you get older.
Myth number 6 is plant protein inferior for building muscle. You touched on the idea of values and things like that, but more and more of my patients, and I think yours too, are going plant-based. So is there a disadvantage from being a plant-based, protein-focused person?
No, I don't think there is one, and I think this has gradually changed. If you go back a few decades, they were telling you complementary proteins, that you had to mix and match different amino acids from different foods together. If, for example, you're a vegan or vegetarian. I think as in the last few decades, that's kind of come around to where, listen, as long as you're getting it throughout the day, at some point, your body will be able to create those complementary proteins for muscle building. So it's not as important as we once thought it was. Vegan, you can totally do it. I just think you do need to be a little bit more mindful, because when you're a vegan getting your protein rarely will come in an isolated package. It will come with other things with it. When you're getting your protein in a vegan diet, it's either going to come with fiber, fat, or carbohydrates. Think of legumes, right? Fantastic. But it's going to come with those carbohydrates that you need to account for, and the fiber, which is fantastic. Or tofu, right? That's going to come with that protein that you want. But remember, it's also coming with that fat. So again, you just need to be mindful of those extra calories if you're trying to lose weight, for sure. That it takes a little bit more meal planning, I'd say.
That brings us to the last myth, myth number 7. Does more protein automatically equal more muscle? You touched on this a little bit, but I know this is driven by social media. If I just eat a ton of protein, will I build muscle magically? Am I Popeye? I have pop that spinach and I'm good to go?
It's a common myth. You're right. And no, right. It's complementary to that resistance training that is just as equally important, right? Workout, stimulate the muscle to grow hypertrophy, break it down, and then rebuild it with your protein intake. So it's complementary.
Dr. Edney, this was incredible. I know we only scratched the surface. I'm looking forward to more talks on health and nutrition with you for everyone's benefit. If you're watching this and you've been confused about protein or honestly about nutrition in general, this is exactly why Dr. Eddy created his Food is Health MD YouTube channel with my little gentle prodding. So if you haven't already, go subscribe now. And if you want more on the medical side, the hormones, the longevity, the metabolic health, subscribe to my channel too. Together, we're covering it from both sides. Now, here's the thing. Videos like this can give you the knowledge, but knowledge without action doesn't change outcomes. And one of the biggest problems in healthcare right now is that most people don't have a physician they can access. You have a question about your protein intake, your labs, your medications, and you're waiting 3 weeks for a 10-minute appointment where nobody remembers your name, or most likely going to AI now. That's exactly why Dr. Eddy and I built Bespoke Concierge MD. It's direct access to physicians who actually know you, your history, your goals, your plan. Whether you're trying to optimize your nutrition, manage a chronic condition, dial in your hormones, or just finally have a doctor who picks up the phone, that's what we do. Every member gets a personalized care plan built around their life, not a one-size-fits-all protocol. If that sounds like the kind of medical care you've been looking for, check out Bespoke Concierge MD. The link will be in the description. We'd love to have you. Dr. Edney, thank you. We'll see everybody guys in the next one.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
Awesome.